She laughed in my face and called me a charity case in front of the entire class. Her words burned into my memory. "You'll never make it without handouts." I clutched my scholarship letter, my cheeks burning, and made a silent promise. One day, I'd show her who I really was. Years later, I didn't just prove her wrong. I owned the college auditorium she was speaking in. She stood on my stage, under my name, never imagining the tables would turn. This is the story of how humiliation became my ultimate triumph, and karma's perfect masterpiece. I still remember the first day I walked into Westbridge College, clutching my acceptance letter like it was my lifeline. I had worked my entire high school career for this moment, pouring hours into assignments and volunteering, fueled by the hope that one day I could escape the small apartment I shared with my mom. When the scholarship letter arrived, I cried, half from relief, half from disbelief. Westbridge was a prestigious private college, the kind of place where students drove luxury cars and wore designer shoes. I arrived with my worn-out sneakers and a backpack that had seen better days. That morning, I found my seat in the lecture hall, trying to blend in. I barely had time to exhale before a girl with glossy hair and a diamond bracelet glanced at my papers and smirked. "Oh," she said loudly, making sure everyone could hear, "so you're the scholarship kid." A few heads turned, and I felt my stomach drop. I managed a small nod, hoping that would end it. It didn't. "Must be nice," she continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Getting a free ride while the rest of us actually pay to be here. I guess hard work doesn't always mean money, huh? Or maybe you're just lucky." Then she leaned back in her chair, whispering just loud enough, "Charity case." Laughter rippled through the row behind her, and I felt my face heat up. I wanted to disappear into the floor. Every insecurity I'd ever buried came crashing back. I suddenly felt like I didn't belong, like I was an imposter among people who could buy their way into every room I had to fight to enter. But while my body stayed frozen in that chair, my mind whispered something else. "Remember this." I forced myself to sit up a little straighter, even as my chest ached. I didn't reply to her, didn't defend myself. Instead, I made a quiet promise that one day, I would rise so high that her words would mean nothing. One day, I would turn this humiliation into something bigger, something she could never take away. I had no idea then how far that vow would take me. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Everywhere I went, I felt the weight of invisible eyes on me. In the cafeteria, whispers trailed behind me like shadows, snippets of conversation I wasn't meant to hear but couldn't ignore. "That's the scholarship girl," someone would murmur. "I heard she lives in the bad part of town." I'd keep my head down, pretending not to notice, but each comment chipped away at the excitement I had once felt about being here. Money was always tight. While other students grabbed lattes between classes or ordered food at trendy restaurants, I packed simple lunches from home and rationed my meal plan. My textbooks were secondhand, covered in someone else's highlighter marks. I learned to sit in the back of the library so I wouldn't have to watch study groups form around me, groups I was never invited to join. And then there was her, Vanessa, the same girl who had humiliated me on my first day. She seemed to exist in a world I could never touch. She wore a new outfit every week, her nails perfectly done, and she always arrived in the passenger seat of a sleek black car that dropped her off right at the entrance. Her laughter echoed through the halls as she surrounded herself with admirers, always at the center of attention. I avoided her as much as I could, but every time our paths crossed, she'd give me that knowing smirk, as if she owned the place and I was just trespassing. One evening, after a particularly long day of classes and work-study hours at the library, I sat on the edge of my dorm bed and seriously wondered if I should quit. Maybe I didn't belong here. Maybe Vanessa was right. Maybe I was just lucky, a fluke who would eventually fail. Tears pricked my eyes as I stared at my scholarship letter pinned to the wall, now wrinkled from months of being a silent reminder. But then I remembered why I had come here. I thought of my mother's proud face, of the dreams I had whispered to myself in that tiny apartment, promising I'd make a mark no one could erase. I wiped my tears and whispered, Not yet. I'm not giving up yet. Everything began to change the semester. I decided to stop hiding. I realized that if I kept letting shame control me, I'd never get anywhere. So I buried myself in my academics, determined to prove, at least to myself, that I deserved my place at Westbridge. I spent late nights in the library, not because I was afraid of the whispers anymore, but because I wanted to be the best. Slowly, my grades became my armor. Professors started to notice my dedication, and for the first time since arriving, I felt like I was more than the scholarship kid. It was during one of those long study sessions that I met Professor Carter, a soft-spoken business lecturer who noticed my notes were twice as detailed as anyone else's. He asked about my goals, and for the first time, I admitted that I wanted to start my own business someday. Instead of laughing, he nodded thoughtfully and told me about a campus entrepreneurship program I had never considered. "You have the drive," he said. "You just need the right focus." His encouragement lit something inside me. I joined the program and started small, selling custom planners I designed and printed myself. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Soon, students who had once ignored me started buying my planners, then asking for personalized versions. Each sale felt like a tiny victory, a piece of validation that came not from pity or luck, but from my own work. With every late night and small success, something shifted in me. The humiliation that had once crushed me became my fuel. Every smirk, every whispered comment from Vanessa and her circle turned into quiet motivation. I no longer wanted to disappear. I wanted to rise so high that they'd have no choice but to see me. By the end of that year, my side hustle was covering my expenses, and I had earned a campus award for entrepreneurial innovation. Standing on that small stage to accept my certificate, I caught Vanessa's eye in the crowd. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or shame. I felt unstoppable. I realized then that I wasn't just surviving college anymore. I was building the foundation of something much bigger. Graduation felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. I had my degree, my small business, and a heart full of ambition, but the real world didn't care about any of that. My first months after college were brutal. I sent out proposals to local businesses, offering my custom organizational products and design services, and almost all of them ignored me. The few that replied gave polite rejections, explaining they didn't have the budget or weren't interested right now. I worked part-time at a cafe to keep the lights on, spending nights fulfilling tiny online orders that barely made a dent in my bills. There were days I considered quitting, the same way I had almost quit college. But I remembered Vanessa's smirk, those whispers, and the promise I'd made to myself to rise above every ounce of doubt thrown my way. I refused to let the struggle break me. Then, one day, everything shifted. A local event planning company stumbled across my products online and placed a bulk order for their clients. It wasn't huge, but it was my first real contract, enough to cover rent and reinvest in better materials. I poured every ounce of energy into fulfilling that order perfectly. When they posted my work on social media, other small businesses started reaching out. One contract turned into three turned into 10, and soon I wasn't just surviving, I was building something sustainable. Over the next few years, I expanded carefully, saving every dollar I could. I upgraded my apartment, hired 2 part-time assistants, and built a modest studio space for production. Opportunities that had once felt impossible began to unfold. My first major income check arrived after landing a corporate partnership that ordered thousands of units for an employee program. Holding that check in my hands, I thought of the nights I'd cried over my wrinkled scholarship letter, and I smiled through tears. Even as my net worth grew, I stayed grounded. I remembered every cafeteria whisper, every late night of quiet determination, and I used those memories to fuel my focus. I didn't buy flashy cars or show off online. Instead, I reinvested in my business, donated to scholarship programs, and kept learning. By my 5th year out of college, I wasn't just stable, I was thriving. My company had a reputation for quality and creativity, and for the first time in my life, I had the freedom to dream bigger than survival. I was no longer the girl who barely fit in. I was a woman building a legacy, one step at a time. It was almost surreal walking back onto Westbridge College's campus years after graduation. I had been invited to a small alumni networking event, and as I strolled past the familiar brick buildings, memories came flooding back, the whispers, the humiliation, the late nights in the library. But now, I walked with confidence, wearing the quiet success I had built through years of relentless work. During the event, I struck up a conversation with a development officer who mentioned that the college was raising funds for renovations. Even the main auditorium, he said, is available for sponsorship and naming rights. It's a big honor for alumni who want to leave their legacy. My heart skipped a beat. That auditorium had been the center of so many memories, lectures, award ceremonies, and the day I vowed I'd prove everyone wrong. Without overthinking, I scheduled a meeting. A few weeks later, I signed the paperwork. My company's success had grown to the point where the sponsorship was not just affordable, it was symbolic. Seeing my name etched onto the new plaque of the Westbridge Auditorium felt like the universe whispering, "You did it." I didn't announce it publicly or boast online. I wanted the moment to speak for itself when the time came. That time arrived months later, when the college invited me to attend a high-profile alumni lecture. I skimmed the program and froze. The keynote speaker was Vanessa, the same girl who had once called me a charity case. I sat in the audience as she strutted onto the stage, confident and polished as ever, heels clicking against the wooden floor I now technically owned. She began her speech without noticing me. But then, in the middle of her introduction, she turned slightly and saw the gleaming letters on the side wall. My name, Auditorium. Her voice faltered for the briefest moment. Her eyes darted toward the plaque, then out to the audience, and finally, they found me. I offered a polite, almost casual smile. No words, no confrontation, just the quiet knowledge that life had turned the tables completely. The rest of her speech went on, but I could see it in her posture, in the tightness of her jaw. She knew. The girl she had once mocked now owned the very stage she stood on. It was a moment of poetic justice I would never forget. I sat in the second row, hands folded in my lap, watching Vanessa deliver her keynote on my stage. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years ago, I had sat in this same auditorium, too humiliated to speak, wishing I could disappear. Now, I didn't need to say a single word. She continued her speech, her voice smooth, but I caught the subtle cracks. Every time her eyes flicked toward the plaque on the wall, her confidence wavered. The audience probably thought nothing of it, but I knew exactly what was running through her mind. She had to stand there, speaking in the very auditorium that bore my name, forced to acknowledge in silence what life had done. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat. I just listened, calm and composed, letting the moment wash over me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about the quiet, undeniable truth that success speaks louder than any insult ever could. After the speech ended, she walked off stage, passing right by me. For a brief second, our eyes met. No words were exchanged, but in her glance, I saw it, shock, regret, and a flicker of respect she'd never shown before. As the applause died down, I leaned back in my chair, breathing in the satisfaction of poetic justice. I had waited years for this, and patience had delivered the perfect moment. Life had come full circle, and karma had done its work without me lifting a finger. In that quiet victory, I realized I didn't need validation from anyone, not anymore. My success, my journey, and my name on that wall said everything for me. Life has a way of handing out perfect, silent justice. The girl who called me a charity case now speaks in the auditorium I own, with my name proudly displayed on the wall. I didn't need revenge, arguments, or public shaming. My success was enough. When I walked past her that day, she couldn't even meet my eyes. If life teaches you anything, it's this: don't let anyone's mockery define you. Work in silence, stay patient, and one day, your success will speak louder than any insult ever could.